Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I'm wondering if it's good just take a minute and take just a couple of deep breaths and just begin to call your energy to this space and this moment. And just notice your body and notice how you're feeling. Take a minute, take a couple of deep breaths. I think a lot of times, especially in American society, we're always rushing. We're going from one thing to the next, and it's almost like, how do we slow our bodies down and slow ourselves down? So take a minute and just take a couple of deep breaths and just check in with your body and just notice any aches or pain or fatigue. Just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Just find the rhythm of your breath. I have a funny story. I remember, so I come from a very anxious family, not unlike many of us, where I remember my teta was just in this frenzy, how to be anxious state. And I said, Teta, just take a minute, just breathe. You know, me, a new therapist wanting to help my grandma, right, get some skills. And I said, Teta, please just breathe. And she goes, yeah, but you should breathe, Teta, but you should breathe. And I was like, Teta, it all starts with the breath. And this is where so many of us in our culture, so many of us were raised in environments where the adults in our life were just not able to manage their emotions. So many of us, when our family members were in this frenzied state, just think about, what state did you go in? Did you retreat within yourself? Did you try and fight them? No, Tete, you gotta breathe. And she would fight you more. Or did you just retreat within yourself and just say, oh gosh, this is too much, and you stay quiet? Or sometimes there's no response and you're just frozen. Or did you say, oh, I'm out of here, gotta go? You leave. And so just think about, before we move into emotional regulation and the tools that we're going to talk about today, I want you to assess for yourself. Yeah, thank you, Christine. Christine says, that's me. I need to work on regulating my emotions. That's most of us, right? And so we're going to hopefully, but first it's understanding how you responded with the adults in your life, mom, dad, grandparents, aunties, uncles, like what, how did you as a child respond to their, what I call Arabi hysteria? How did you respond to that? Did you fight, flight, freeze? Sometimes fawn. You moved into people pleasing, trying to do everything and anything to get them to calm down. Now think about it, not you as an adult, but you as a child. I think for myself, I did a variety. Yes, Mira, thank you. People pleasing was the number one thing I hear from Arab, is you go right into people pleasing. Mom is hysteria, in hysteria. You know, there's an azuma, there's stuff bustling, right? And then you're helping her with the dishes, helping her with this, trying to get to manage her emotions. If dad was shouting or yelling, right? Many of us, flight, we ran because we knew, for at least in my generation, my time, there might have been punishment, physical punishment. So we would run, right? So each and every one of you, when you think about that, because your response to intense emotions is going to dictate how you regulate your emotions today, typically. So people will say, I need to work on regulating my emotions. Yes, but you're going to be responding from that place as a child. So your nervous system, that's what I have to always remind my clients, myself, family members, when we have this intense emotional reaction, yes, we're under a lot of pressure, we're under a lot of stress. However, that typically comes from a learned response from when we were children. So your overreactivity stems from that child within that needed to be taken care of, that needed somebody to help soothe them. But we didn't have that, many of us. How many of you have had the adult growing up? How many of you had that adult to help you self-regulate? If anything, they exacerbated it. If anything, you're a child in distress and they're like either punishing you or shaming you or harming you. And this is not to, um, there's so much beauty in our culture, you guys, so much beauty. Yet we need to really be able to talk about the things that didn't serve us. So I want you to think about this exercise. I want you guys to start with something small. We're not going to move into anything heavy, especially now. I was thinking about this, like as a Arab community, as a Middle Eastern community, as a Palestinian community. This exercise is around radical acceptance. And I thought, okay, for the situation that's going on, we're not trying to accept that. So this is not the exercise for that. How can I stop being a people pleaser? Yes, we're going to go into um, this exercise, which hopefully will address that. So the exercise we're doing is radical acceptance. Now think about, again, a benign situation, nothing too triggering, nothing too emotional, because I want you to get the tools first. And if you use something too triggering, more than likely you'll get too flooded and it's not going to work. Now, I want you to imagine a distressing situation. Just imagine it. Notice your body as you start to recall the distressing situation. Making sure to breathe because I can already sense some of the energy. So, yeah, let's take a minute. Just breathe as you start to think about, imagine. I want you to see it, be there, this distressing situation. Now, think about what events led up to this distressing situation. Now, think about what happened prior to the event, the things that, okay, distressful situation, what led up to it. Notice any thoughts that went through your mind prior to this distressing situation. And does everybody have that event that they're thinking about? Notice went through your mind. What were some of the things you were experiencing? This goes back to what Mito was saying around the people pleasing. Many times before we get to it, that distressing situation, there are things that lead up to that. We're either people pleasing, we're going against our instinct, we're not trusting our intuition. Particularly, I could say for our Arab or Middle Eastern community, uh, we are probably, if I could say this, and maybe I'm biased, probably some of the most intuitive people. We sense things, we know things, we can feel things, we can attune a lot. Yet many times, because of our cultural messaging, we negate that and we suppress it. So when we're in distressful situations, more often than not, we are ignoring our instinct all throughout the way. I'm not saying that's true for you. I'm saying in general, this is what happens. So now that you have the events that led up to this distressing situation, I know this could be difficult, but what role did you play in that creating this situation? What role? Now, many times we say, I didn't do anything. It was my sister, or oh, it was my brother, or oh, my family member, or my boss upset me. It was them. Think about what role did you play? Did you people please too much? Did you not trust your instinct? How did you let go of fault and blame? I know إحنا العرب, we're so good at blaming ourselves and judging ourselves. Let go of this idea of fault and blame and focus on what led you to that in a more compassionate, loving way. To say, okay, what was my role? I let them step over my boundaries. I said yes when I wanted to say no. Does anybody have any feedback as we're going through this on what role you could have played in this situation? If anyone feels comfortable to share, please chime in the comments on what role did you play in creating this situation? I know I could speak for myself. Many times I overextended myself, always saying yes. Thank you, Mira. Totally. That's yes. Saying yes to so many different things because, yes, too intense. Yes. So many times, thank you, Christine, because when you have these outbursts that are so intense, it's usually because there was lines that were crossed many times, like way before it got to the outburst. There was already your nervous system, if you or have more awareness around it, was already getting maxed out. But إحنا العرب, one thing I can tell you guys, or people from Middle Eastern communities in general, is our frustration tolerance is so high that we can be our nervous system can be so maxed out for weeks, and and, and then we flash at somebody moving a cup from here to here. Okay, so you have to remember, we want to lower the frustration tolerance, how to say no, and in our culture it's very difficult to say no. So what role did you play in that situation? And I know that could be really, really hard. But once you can say, oh, yeah, I people pleased, I said yes when I really wanted to say no, I did these things. That way you have agency over yourself. Once you create that awareness, you could go, oh, I don't want my um, lines to get crossed for these outbursts because it feels so uncomfortable and it hurts your body. Yes. Um, Immortal Beloved says, many times I remained silent to accommodate others' trauma reactions, but it didn't serve me. So I ended up confronting people later in life. Yes. Um, it's a real big one. That's a huge one. And I have a whole workshop on trauma. So I want to pin that because that one can dive us real deep into some heavy stuff. So I'm going to pin that. So let's keep going if you guys are okay. Let's talk about, we're going to go, what is your role? Now, many of us, we said saying yes instead of no. Our frustration tolerance was high. We're agreeing to all these things that maybe we don't want to agree to. Now, the fun part. What role did the other people play? Another person. What did they do? Describe their actions or inaction of other people that may have contributed to this distressing event. Now, be realistic, only describe factual information associated with the event. Many times we have this impulse, we want a emotional impulse to blame or exaggerate. إحنا العرب, we love to exaggerate. So I'm going to say, try and be as honest as possible within yourself on what did the other person do or not do that contributed to this distressing event? If I could say, many of us are people pleasers, and it's usually in the inaction of others that causes distress, because many of us do so much for other people that our nervous system just wants somebody to do something for us, and then when they don't do it, because we assume, like, hey, I'm doing all this for you, where's the reciprocity? And in their inaction, that can cause a lot of distress, a lot, significant distress, because many times we think, I'm doing all this for you, but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this for you from my heart because I'm generous, because we're kind. We come from this culture of so much generosity and love, and I'm doing all this for you. Now, yes, without expecting anything in return, but then when you need something, they're not there, or they're not responding in a way that maybe you needed. What are some other things people do? This is the fun part, you guys, help me out. What are some other things that people do that cause you distress or cause the situation distress? So I mentioned inaction. The other piece that I see and that I notice, yes. Oh my gosh, they demonize. Yeah, they demonize you. They make you the problem. So when you hold the boundary, or if you express a need, then all of a sudden they make you the problem. They're like, oh, look at you, you're so needy. Or why, oh, what happened to you? What happened to you? That's a good one. When you start holding boundaries with people, what happened to you? You used to be so nice. Yes, thank you, Christine. They sabotage you. I would love to hear more about how they sabotage you. That's such a good one. Yes. Oh, the smear campaign. They get others to see you as the problem. Yes, very much so. Especially within our culture, I call them the cackling hens. It's like they all start to conspire and start chatting. Like I was Bitcoin, and they keep talking, and then it starts to fester within our community. And then that's the narrative versus people really understanding what the true story is, or even caring about what the true story is. Yeah, that's a big one. So you could see how toxic the behaviors are in what role other people play in creating this distressful situation. Now let's keep going. If no one has questions, I'm going to keep going through this exercise so we can get to the reason why I go through this at length is because it's important for you to understand the mechanics of what happens. It's not just a distressful situation. It's not. It is a situation that can be, in a sense, you can have autonomy, you can have agency, you can have your own control. You can set the energy for yourself in any distressful situation. And that's why I wanted us to start with very benign, simple situations, because with everything that's going on right now in our world, we're not ready, if I could be quite frank. We're not ready to take a look at that yet. So let's start small. Now, what in the distressful situation, what did you have control of in this particular situation? How much control did you have creating this current reality? Now, I know a lot of people feel so disempowered right now. They'll say, Tiffany, I had no control over anything. We have no control over anything that's happening in our world. And I say, okay, yeah. And we still can control our thoughts, our feelings, and our responses. No one can take that from you. No one can affect that within you unless you allow them to. So when you think about this distressful situation, what control did you have? It is always up to you how you respond, no matter what is going on. And I know that's tough. Sometimes the control can be very simple. It could be, did I eat? Did I get enough sleep? Did I have enough fun time, or is it just all work and no play? I always think of Nelson Mandela as an example, or I think about all the Palestinians, right? Everybody, all these people going through these horrific things, and they still have agency over how they think or how they move. Well, how can we take lessons from that and go, okay, yeah, this is distressing, but what can I do to take control of that? Yeah, I love that. Thank you, you guys. Thank you. Yeah, my agency. Spending time. Thank you, him. Spending time with people who didn't constantly judge me. Super important. We talked about that last week, last community healing. You cannot heal when you're surrounded by vultures. And we come from communities where we can't just cut these people off. So, how do you take care of yourself? And I do have a cultural messages workshop that spends a lot of time talking about that. Okay, so what did you have control of? You try to leave or do something else. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mira. All right, now for the more challenging part. What didn't you have control of in this situation? No matter how much, sometimes we think we're more powerful over somebody else. Like we can influence other people to change or shift. And I always say, we're not that powerful. We're not. But that little person inside you wants to have that person be different, be better, and there's that pull to say and belief. Yet many times, 100% of the time, we cannot control another person at all. So what didn't you have control of? Yeah. Well, Christine, I love, thank you so much for the feedback. My anger, you know, that takes practice. Your anger can feel out of control. Trust me, I am the queen of snapping. Like, I'm a therapist. Yes, I have all my skills, my meditation, but yet you have to remember that that takes so much practice depending on the situation, depending on, and that's where mindfulness comes in. And that's where this exercise is to help you guys to get mindful around how are you moving? How can you get your needs met before the situation becomes so distressful? It doesn't come from the activating triggering event. It's all the things that are leading up to it that we're ignoring. We just suppress and ignore how we're feeling. Because that's for many of us in our culture, we were taught to suppress our feelings. How many of you were told, Ma'lash, insa, don't worry, let it go. Why are you thinking about that? It's no big deal. Even somebody the other day said, Wahad Arabi, we were talking about a distressful situation, and he says, people have it worse. Well, of course, there's always going to be somebody that can have it worse. But for you in your life, in your situation, it's pretty bad for you. And can you validate that for yourself and not negate it? And so, what didn't you have control over? And many times we don't have control over somebody else's response. We can only control our own response. And how do you find peace and acceptance in knowing that you cannot control another person's behavior? No matter how good you are, no matter how much you people please, no matter how much you do for them or for your work or for your parents or for your friends or for your partners, husband, children, you still cannot control what they do. You can only manage your own feelings and what you need to do for you. And sometimes people will have vehement reactions to that. And I say that's okay. Then they can go to therapy, they can do the work, they can handle it themselves. As long as you know for within yourself, this is what you need. And sometimes it takes time, especially إحنا العرب, to assess what we need because our needs were constantly negated. All right. Now let's go back to that distressful situation you started off at the beginning of our life here today. Go back to the beginning. Just notice your body as you start to think about that distressful situation. Now, given everything you've kind of outlined, what was your response to this situation? How did you choose to respond? Did you flip out? Did you take a step back? Did you people please? I know many times it feels like, hi there, good to see you. Many times it feels like we have no choice. But again, how did you respond? Don't judge yourself. Try not to judge yourself for how you responded in the distressful situation. If you were reactive, okay, you were reactive. If you weren't your best self, yeah, you flipped out. Yeah, I'm the queen of flipping out. Yeah, exactly. And so when you flip out, it's how can you strengthen that muscle within you to be mindful to recognize your internal state created that flipping out. That other situation or what was going on in front of you, that person, many times I laugh. I said, you know what, that person was just being them. Me flipping out has nothing to do with them. They are who they are, or that work situation is what it is. Me flipping out has everything to do with me. They're just doing them and they're carrying on. Yeah. So when you do that, how do you recognize, okay, that's not my best self. I don't want to be that person. So how do I strengthen that within myself to catch the signs early, as I've mentioned before? Yes. So there's the flipper outers, and then there's the people that retreat and go into silence. Sometimes we go into emotional eating. Sometimes we go into self-medication with drugs or alcohol or sex. Sometimes we will hurt ourselves, which I know many times in our culture we don't talk about. But many times our distress tolerance is very low, and we internalize it and we harm ourselves because really these distressful events cause us more harm than the external event. So just think about that. Does it make sense for you to harm yourself? Doesn't. To feel guilty that other people are less fortunate, or you're harming yourself, and that helps no one. You think your boss, if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, do you think they'll replace you tomorrow? So what was your response to the situation? And think about, was this response in alignment with who you are and who you want to be? Did you stay silent when you wanted to speak? Was your voice suppressed? Did you engage in rage and yet inside you just wanted peace? So just start to think about that. How did you see yourself? Many times it brings up those core beliefs of I'm not good enough, brings up shame. I'm a terrible person. I'm weak. So many times these responses affect our own thoughts and our own feelings. And what do you do with that? Stay in a cycle of shame? usually not a good idea, because many times it's not your shame to hold. So when you're thinking about these distressing situations, start to remember that for many of us in within our Arabi community, because I work with a lot of Arab, you guys. So, and this is in general, that if somebody does something wrong, many times we blame ourselves for what happened. And this is why I say, if you did not do anything wrong in your mind, body, being, it's not your fault. And how do you not own that? Now, what you can own is how you move forward. You talked about feeling guilty for a response I made 7 years ago. Oh, yeah, totally. I have guilt from like when I was 5 years old. And this is actually kind of a funny story. I was 3 years old, and the Arab never let me live it down, my family. There was like a knife, they were cutting desserts. I'm 3. This is back home for Palestine. I cut, this is the story I was told. I cut the cake. No, the cake, that people were cutting cake and they had the knife there. I grabbed the knife. I'm 3 years old. I grabbed the knife and allegedly I stabbed Auntie. Okay, they made it sound like this lady went to the emergency. I was a 3-year old. Like, how much could I have stabbed her, right? However, I had felt guilty from the time I was 3 years old until now. Listen, till I'm 50 something years old. Do you remember that time? And do you did that when I said, "What are you talking about? I was 3. Where were the adults in the room? Shouldn't they have been responsible for that?" And here I internalized it at a very young age, that I was this bad, terrible person. So remember, a lot of this is not your fault. So we're almost done. We've got, now, if you were to think about this situation and change any response, what could you have done different? What would you have done different? What would you have done different? Would you have spoken up? Would you have stayed silent and let go? What would you have done? That's right. Speak up for yourself. Yeah, stay silent. So you could see that there's no right or wrong to how you respond. It's about what is going to be in alignment with your values. Leave. Yes. That that's probably one of the most powerful things, is to walk away. Because trying to engage with individuals who are emotionally unintelligent, or individuals who are invested in not seeing you or hearing you, is probably a futile effort. But yet, because we have this hope, because we're always trying to people please, we're always trying to see the good in other people, because we're always trying to get people to see us, affirm us, and hear us, we will stay in situations and our high frustration tolerance so much longer than what is healthy for our minds, our bodies, and for those in your being. So this is where, when you're looking at distressful situations in your life, to say to yourself, ask yourself, is this worth me moving? Is this moving me towards myself or away from myself? How could I have responded differently if I was just to radically accept the situation? If I was to say this, if I had to radically accept who this person is, or what this situation is, what would that look like? Where you had no power, no control over the other person. What would it look like if you were to accept the situation fully for what it is? What would that look like? It doesn't mean you're okay with something. A lot of people misconstrue radical acceptance as being okay. Half the stuff that we deal with is not okay. And by no means am I suggesting that this is okay. It's recognizing and accepting whatever is happening. And how can we move forward in a way to say, I can see and accept that this is happening. And what do I need to do within myself to ensure that it is not impacting how I move forward? Anybody have any thoughts on that? On, and this is not that it is what it is. I don't, I don't allow anybody, clients I work with, myself, this it is what it is. It's so disempowering. It's saying, yes, this is happening, and I could see it and I can recognize it, and I can name it. It's awful. It's disempowering. It sucks. It's terrible. Yet, am I going to allow that situation to have me not eat, not sleep, not engage in joy, not be able to communicate effectively because I'm constantly wound tight? That you're going to flash, you're going to suppress, you're going to be emotionally a bottle of nerves unless you can have awareness of what is going on outside of me, because usually we're trying to control something we cannot control. So how can you control the controllables? Let's kind of wrap up. Think about your situation again, the distressing situation you started with at the beginning of the live. Take a deep breath and just notice, if any, there was a shift in how you saw it when you first started working with it and now. Just notice if there's any shift in your body, if there's more ease. Think about the situation. Maybe we could put numbers if that helps. 10, you were very distressed when you first started looking at it. 0, not at all. Maybe if you guys wanted to put a number, 10 being very distressed, 0, not at all. Where are you on that distressing situation? Thank you, Christine. Christine, what was the number before looking at it? It was a 10? Yeah, thank you so much. Huge progress. So you went from a 10 to a 7. That's pretty huge, depending on how distressing it was. And that's the name of the game. And the more it was thank you, Mita. It was a 10, now a 7. Yeah, that's very common. If you were to work through this, right? We did this over 40 minutes, right? 40-minute process that usually, that's why I asked you guys to start with very benign, very easy, like less triggering situations. Now, the more you can practice this, the better you will get. Now, people will say, well, Tiffany, how do I regulate my emotions? Practice, awareness, not awareness to not allowing it to get to the point where it's distressing. It's tuning into your body, trusting what your instincts are telling you. Many times it's like, no, is it? And then we keep going. And then, no, is it? And we keep going. I say, no, no, no. Go to the extreme. It's like trust yourself to say, I'm going to trust myself 100% of the time. Now, you could be wrong. I don't know. But this will get you to your middle ground so that you can really start getting your body used to, getting your body reprogrammed, whatever word you want to use, doesn't matter to me, to trusting what you know for yourself. Now, because we are in these ought to be communities that are constantly negating our experience, you have to be really careful, because there's people out there. Try not to tell people too much, because then they'll start, you're wobbly, they're going to start making you more wobbly. So keep it to yourself till you start to feel strong within yourself. A 5 to a 1. I love that. Yeah. And thank you for using like yes, a 5 to a 1 is an indicator that you were able to move through some of that distress in your body. So let me recap. Trust, pay attention to the signs before you start to, oh, look at the apple. Oh my gosh. Trust yourself before you move in before the distressing situation becomes distressed. Body awareness. I like to do daily check-ins. I like to do just, where am I at? If I'm hungry, tired, or like overwhelmed, I tend to isolate because my reactions, I know many of us have these fiery personalities, our reactions may be too intense. I stay away. I try until I can regulate myself. So be mindful. If you're a retreater and you internalize and you're engaging in behaviors that are harming yourself, emotionally eating, not talking to people, that's, you do the opposite. You reach out to people you feel safe with and that care about you and don't judge you. It's about movement when you're in that excuse me, state of isolation. But if you're in an activated state where you're then that's where you retreat. I always say take a nap, reset, and give yourself permission to do all these things. All right. Well, if there aren't any, are there any questions or anybody that wants to offer anything before we end? I just wanted to thank everybody who joined today. Thank you so much. Every Sunday at 10 a.m., I'll be hopping on just to talk about various topics. Today, we were talking about emotional regulation. And also, if you're interested, I have an autonomic if you're interested in this work, I do have a workshop that's coming up in October, this end of this month. It's coming up. And so if you wanted to join the workshop, my colleague Nina Bratcher and I are going to be doing that. And it's a great workshop to really gain even more tools and more understanding around this. No, thank you to everybody. I really appreciate you. Regulate those emotions, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye, guys. Thanks.